Hey there, and welcome back to the Yaw Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Trucks, and today we have a friend, a client, an amazing human being named Johnny Elsasser. Now, Johnny has a crazy cool story, man. He was the protection detail for I believe, the American ambassador to Iraq. Like, he was in Iraq doing a whole bunch of crazy cool things, protecting our ambassador. And so he has a lot of things he's done that he'll never talk about, which I'm glad, right? On the other side, though, he is one of the most evolved males you'll meet, meaning he's gone through some dark times to find this light time, and he shares from a heart such an amazing space. He's the author of a new book called Design the Man Within. So if you want to be able to have someone that can come and talk to you about how to be a more masculine male in a way that doesn't become overbearing and overarching, but also in a way that serves the world in an amazing way, this is an episode you want to listen to. So you may have said this to a buddy of yours, send it to your husband, but I promise you this will be one that you will really appreciate listening to. That's it. Let's get into the show. Hey, everybody. Hey, we're here. We made it back to the episode. Well, man, my friend, Johnny Elsasser. Johnny, how you doing, man?
Doing well, brother. I just love hanging out with you. It's just always fun.
It's a good time, man. It's always a good time. There's a good mutual respect for the things we both do. We were on here just chatting and talking before we started recording, everybody. So we're already loose. We're a couple brain years in. I don't know if that even makes sense, but it came out of my mouth. So we're gonna rock.
Came out of my mouth. You never know what's gonna come out of Trucks, bro.
I don't know, man. When I get in a loop, like, so the last 3 days I had this event, like a live virtual event I did in my home. So like, I'm smoky brain, bro. Like, my brain is just like, hey, dude, I'm hanging on by the last few threads I got. I know. So when that happens, I get more like jovial than I get like dialed in, we'll call it. So we're gonna have a little fun kind of chat. So let's do this. Just so you guys know, the way that I look at people come on this show, I want people that have some cool experiences, cool stories to share. And Johnny's one of those human beings that has some amazing things, just not just from his professional experience prior to, we'll call it, the thought leadership world he's in now, but also in the world of what he does now, how he shows up as a man, as a husband, as a pig dad and chick dad now. He has like little chickens, apparently. He's a good human, a guy who has a lot of just wealth of knowledge. We're going to unpack that today. Now, I always start the show with the same question. You probably heard it before, but we're going to do it again. Let's say I'm walking around town. Right now happens to be in Austin, Texas, where you're at. And I sit in at a coffee shop. This cool guy with like a Thor-looking beard and his beautiful hair. He turns to you and you start talking to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
Oh, man. All right, on the spot. I would say you should listen to me because at the end of the day, I have struggled just as every other man struggles, and I don't try to hide that. The only thing that makes me different nowadays is I've gained a lot of tools that help me get through the dark times quicker than when I used to sit in them. And hopefully in this conversation, I can give you a couple tools that might help you through something in your life.
I dig it, man. Let's unpack your framing of dark times, because we all have different perspectives. I think it's all relative to us as humans, right? When you state dark times, like what can somebody sit there and go, yeah, I'm having that going?
You know, dark times for me, it's always it's those moments when you're alone and everything just kind of starts to close in on you, and you start to be your harshest critic and the, biggest judgmental person on the planet to yourself. And that's, to me, it's the dark times because it's like the thoughts in those moments, that we just constantly start to pile on ourselves is what can defeat us. That is what can put us down into the dirt and put us into our own vices and start to have us shy away from our goals, shy away from anything that we want in life in general, even just to have a happy day. I mean, it can push us away from that when you get in that. So for dark times, for me, that's what I look at it meaning.
Like that. I think that there's a truth to it for sure, because I noticed that people sometimes are in dark times, but they don't realize it. Like, I've had parts of my life and segments where I've been in the middle of it, and I didn't realize how it felt till I get out of it. Like, you don't realize how dark it is till you find some light. And so I want some people to hear that, because I think some people might not realize, like, they're in a fog and it's kind of dark. And sometimes the wake up call, like this conversation, they wake up. So,
Yeah.
so you had your dark time. Do you mind sharing your dark times? We'll call it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I love that you actually said that because I think there is a lot of people like they're in their dark times and they may not even know it. They're just kind of like going through life and they just know things aren't optimal, but they're not sure what's even going on, right? And I think that that's actually a really good point.
Mm,
Um, for me, like when I found mine was when I left special operations and I was, I left protecting the U.S. ambassador to Iraq and I came home and just really lost my purpose. I wasn't fighting for a flag anymore that I'd done for a decade. I
mm,
wasn't representing the flag or the people of this great country. I was literally just living my life being a cog in the wheel. And I was like, dude, what are you doing right now? Like, I remember being behind a computer being like what is the end game right now for you? And I was like, I don't know.
mm,
And when I lost that purpose, I was like, it kind of like crushed me from being this elite level soldier serving overseas, combat tours, all these things, and then realizing like I had no direction. Like I had no direction, and literally the only thing I could come up with was like, well, I'll sit behind this desk for 65 years and then I'll retire and I can really live life then. And it's like, no, man,
yeah,
like that to me sounded miserable because
yeah,
what I was doing for that time wasn't anything that actually filled me up or lit me up or anything like that. So my dark time started
yeah,
then. That's when I drove into drinking a lot. That's when I was having my own inner turmoil of just not being the best version of myself, saying dumb stuff
yeah,
when you're being drunk. You know the deal. Most people do doing dumb
yep,
things and remembering it the next day and being like, "Did I really say this stuff? Like, who is this guy?" And
yeah.
then
I kicked some chicken butt in the bar one time.
you what?
I was drinking. I kicked some chick in the butt in a bar. I was just like, she was walking by. I just gave her a good heel in the butt. It was just one of the stupid. I flipped the chick in the throat too. I don't know what it was. I like to hit women for no reason. Just joking. But no, like she was walking by, kind of like they're like, oh my god. She was like, I was like, get out of the way. Or something weird. I was like being a punk, and I was like, and then
Yeah.
she was like, what? It's just freaked out. And I'm like, I guess in response, that was the proper action. And then I always like I flick my buddies. I flick them in the throat, like a dumb thing I do. And like this chick was talking to me, and my drunk brain goes flick her in the throat. So I did that. Like you do dumb things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
she didn't like that too.
you remember that stuff and it's embarrassing and you're like
Yeah,
ashamed of it. And then you're like, bro, I would never
exactly.
do that with all my faculties. I would never do that.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I started going down that path, and then it ultimately also led to having a bad relationship with my ex-wife, which turned into a divorce. And at that point, I was like, there was a lot that I was taking as a hit on who I was as a man, like a failed marriage. I wasn't living up to my fullest potential. I was living to just drink on the weekends and escape life and like have my own vices, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is not it. And at that point, my darkness was like sitting there being like, well, you know what? You're really good at whatever you go to. So like you're either gonna be elite and be elite at being a piece of crap, or you're gonna be elite at being really
Mhm.
good. And so you need to
Yeah.
pick a
Yeah.
choice. And that was like
I
when
like
I
that.
sat with that, that was where I had that honest conversation to say, well, you know what? I'm gonna go to, for utilizing, your business, dark work, like I'm gonna go to the light. I'm gonna go and be that good elite version of myself, and that's what I went to
I
instead
like
of
that.
going down to
Mm.
the elite bad path.
Big man. And it's funny, some people know this, and some people know it and do nothing, right?
Hmm.
That's the hard part. And what's even worse is they'll do it, and people will tell them, "You know what you're doing." No, I don't want to hear about it. And then they still just continue on doing it. They don't realize the path of crazy they leave in their wake. And it's not healthy for anybody in the long run. But it's good to initially be able to find that, pay attention
Hmm.
to it, understand it. I think we all have those moments. But what do you think when it comes to like, you acknowledging? 'Cause I think there is a part of us that goes, I acknowledge that. And for some, like you said, I'm gonna be an elite person. It's who I am. How you do one things, how you do everything, right? But I think there's some people that go, if I work on this, it's going to be such a haul to deal with that I don't even want to face it. I just want to sit
Hmm.
there and it's almost better to just not even, because they don't know if it's going to be better, how it could be. Will they forgive me? That kind of stuff. Like, how does somebody navigate a mentality of like, I know what I got to do, but I'm scared of actually doing it?
This is like I was having a conversation with somebody. It was such a great question. This is why you do what you do. This is really good. Because like when you have that internal conversation, what's happening with most people is they're seeing the big goal, they're seeing the big picture, and then involved in that big picture, they're seeing every single step that has to go into that big picture. And then it becomes just complete
Yeah.
paralysis. They're like, I'm not going to do that. There's so much involved in there. There's so much effort in every single step. So one of the things that I could tell those people is like, see the goal of what you're looking at and then just compartmentalize everything. This is one thing in special operations that I will never take for granted. We were very good at compartmentalization.
Mhm.
You take what's in front of you. You take, like, if I was looking to take down a house, right? We were going to go do a mission on a house. I had to get through the front door first because nothing after the front door existed if I didn't make it. So I had to take the
Yeah.
environment in front of me. And when it comes to goals and when it comes to like knowing that people need to do something different, it's compartmentalized. Look at what's in front of you and just take that. Take that first step of what's in front of you. What happens on the other side of that door, take that when it comes. But you're going to need to
Mhm.
get to the front door first. And so that
Mhm.
compartmentalization is one thing that I hand off to people and say, hey, if you can do anything right now, what's that one step? And this is like one of the things that like I even have forgotten from time to time, and people like you that have been in my life have reminded me of this. Like, what's that one step you can do right now? But when we
Mhm.
continue to just see this big goal, we just like see everything involved, and nobody ever wants to do all that because you're like, oh my gosh, like it's like 30 steps, and every step takes a lot of work. And it's like, well, just do one, and just keep going one and one and one, and soon you're gonna look back and you're gonna be 29 steps down the road, and it's gonna be like, oh crap,
Yeah.
like that wasn't that bad.
Not too bad at all. It's the idea of how to eat an elephant, one
Yeah,
bite at
yeah,
a time, right?
exactly.
It's a single. There's actually a good book. I want to say it's called. Is it called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg? It talks about the idea that
Mm,
like there's actually like a nursing home concept of somebody like there's two people both had hip surgeries and they're both getting well and one person was told, hey, if somebody comes, I want you to think about what you would do to get from your room to the actual front of the building so that you could actually greet them. And the other person, they didn't tell them that. They just said, hey, just, what if someone, they did nothing. So someone would come and they would actually have two people leave the room. And one person who left the room, the first thing they face would be like, oh, they go back to the room. It's just too far. The
mm,
person who thought through the different segments of what it was and compartmentalized, like you talked about, I'm going to do this first, I'll do that first, do that first. Okay, I got it all planned out. I'm just going to do this. They were the ones that reached the doorway. And I think part of it is also when you're doing that, not only are you able to face the one thing, but it actually gives you this perspective like, I've thought through what could go wrong. And I now also have a muscle of thinking through what can go wrong, even in real time. So we'll take better steps in the direction of facing our giants because, well, I've got a plan in place. Like just that little
hmm
thing helps you.
Well, and you're giving you're
Weird piece of,
stacking you're stacking wins. You know, you're stacking wins is what you're doing because like
yep,
to get to the front door, you're now going to have an accomplishment, a small accomplishment, and that's going to reinforce the idea of whatever it is you're trying to do. So then you're just going to compound.
mhm,
It's like compartmentalization and then compounding wins through that compartmentalization. And
yep,
then that's the motivation. That's the thing
I
that says,
agree.
"Oh yeah, you can do it."
Yeah. So when you choose to do it, right? So I agree. The full, I think it's when we have the idea of it and it gives you some hope and aspiration. We can go forward a little bit. We can make some bigger steps and better steps. For you, what do those steps look like, right? Because I think there's a side of us. I'll say this. I'll say evolved men, right? Once you've gone through a journey, you realize that there's like a part of our society that says masculinity is this, which is you don't say nothing, you dial
Hmm
in, you just eat it, right? And there's a part of I call it the evolved male that goes like, yeah, that's a part of me, but I'm also the guy that will kill you in a parking lot if I need to, right? Just you have to
hmm
find a way to have the two dance inside. But I think I can't get to the point of being the most effective man unless I've been able to navigate and actually express the hard crap I've gone through, right? And so there's a journey of going through that's necessary, I think, for what you're talking to is like I was in my dark place. I knew I was going to be elite in whatever it was. I was being elite in the wrong direction. I got to go now do this stuff. And in doing
hmm
that, my assumption is without knowing too much about it yet, there's probably things you had to say or own up to or, deal with that like they didn't make you feel like the best person in the world. But when you've gone past and done it, you go, damn it, I'm better than most because I faced my giants kind of thing.
hmm Yeah. And those internal like confrontations that I like to refer to them as, because that's what we're doing. We're just confronting the internal ego. You're confronting the insecurities. And what we have to first do is remember that like we're not victims. Like everything that happens outside of us is literally for our doing. Like we are, our
Yeah.
external outcomes are being received because of how we interact with the outside world, right? And so when we look at that and you say, okay, how do I balance myself? How do I create that man who can be dangerous, but also empathetic, but also understanding and move forward as this holistic version of what a good man should be? I have to also be like, well, what are the things I'm running from? Like, what is the conversations that I'm having that's actually causing me to either play a victim in which then I get defensive or lash out, right? And then, like, how do I need to speak to myself? And for me, it was like, I had so many because the fact that I came from this super alpha lifestyle that all the internal conversations were like, don't ask the real questions, because if you do, you're going to expose something you thought was very strong, and you're going to expose it to being like, oh, actually I'm undeveloped in that area. And I wouldn't even say,
Hmm.
you don't even, I mean, you could call it a weakness, but I would say it's more undeveloped because most of us, we just haven't spent time in
Like,
that conversation. And so it's just
yeah,
realizing, like, if I'm going to have this conversation with myself, one, I need to be honest with the answer, and two, I need to be honest with the work that needs to take place to then correct that behavior or change that answer to being what I
yeah,
want it to be. And once we
beautiful.
see that internally, that's where we can really make our money.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like if you approach it as like being like you're a warrior, genuinely, like that you're a warrior, right? So if you approach these little things like you just bring the warrior to that new problem, right? So it's like
Hmm.
you don't acknowledge the problem, acknowledge that it exists, but you don't get to actually bring the warrior to handle that situation. So what you're saying, and in my
Yeah.
way of thinking through it is like I
Yeah. I
got to
love
give
that.
myself the ability to admit it, and I can bring the best of me to the thing that's the worst of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And
It
that
sounds,
it's,
I'm not gonna lie, it's so dope, bro.
that is for, you might want to coin that one. Like just rip that one out and be like, I want to use that.
Yeah. Bring the best of me to the worst of me. That's pretty good. Anyways, keep going.
Look at you, just coming, just spitting fire today. But that is what it is, man. Because like, when you look back, when I look back at my life, like there was never. I've done this since when I was a kid, and I wouldn't have known this until I actually looked at the history of my life and then like had these conversations. But one of the things that reinforces how I live life today and go after my goals is the fact that I looked back and I said, Johnny, when you were young, you realized like every time you had a quote unquote weakness, you turned it into a strength. And I never realized this. And one of those things was that, like, when I was playing soccer, played for 20 years, but when I was younger, they wanted me to move to being a left fullback. And I was, predominantly right handed. And I was like, well, shoot, I don't like play with my left foot. Like, I can kind of
Mhm.
use it, but I don't play with it. They asked me to move over. So what did I do? I trained day in and day out, just literally using my left foot, going around cones, doing all these left footed drills. And then soon enough, I could play
Yeah,
just as well with my left foot as I could with my right, and I converted that weakness into a strength to where it made me a dominant left fullback. And it was very cool to like watch that process happen. And I did the same thing when I was in protection with shooting and all of these other things. And I realized that like when we can go and do that, like and especially with these conversations that we internally have, that you can shift any of that into being like, obviously shift, man. Like you can shift that into being a strength in your life. You can shift that into something that looks very different from where you are today, but it takes consistency and it takes
yeah,
perseverance. I always tell everybody I was too dumb to quit. Like that's just been my life. Like I'm just too dumb to quit. And so
yeah,
I'll just constantly do that in everything that I do. Entrepreneurship, I'm just too
yeah,
dumb to quit. Like it's just I'll
yeah.
make
That's
it.
a good way of framing it. I'm for that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm for sure the way. What happens at the end of it? I mean, as long as I'm not heading in a direction where I may, we'll call it statistically have a higher chance of dying. Like I'm just gonna get, it's gonna be uncomfortable, right? It's gonna
Yeah.
be uncomfortable. Doesn't mean, but I always find the discomfort holds the path, right? The thing that I have
Hmm.
discomfort doing is usually because I'm not skilled that area. I'm underdeveloped in the area. So if I can develop that by actually focusing on it, it might open up some new pathway. And it always has. Same for me, business, relationships, health. It's always tied to the same things. And I go, it's life actually isn't all that crazy simple, or sorry, that crazy hard. It's
Yeah.
actually simple, just not easy. We
Yeah.
know what to do. We just don't want to do this thing.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll say one more thing to that too, because this is part of it is when we get into that paralysis because of the fact that we are overcomplicating, because we aren't just like persevering and just being too dumb to quit. The other thing is the fear that we have that's stopping us from doing it. I tell people this all the time. let's walk through a process. Think about what is the worst thing that could happen if you go to do this thing and you fail. And I'm sure you've walked through this process with people as well, but it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you go to this goal, right? And things don't work out like you want to, and you just keep going. Okay, what would happen? What would happen then? What would happen then? What would happen then? What really comes out of every single person I've ever done this with is that their current position in life, which is where they would go back to if anything failed, is the worst nightmare that they're fearful of, but they're actually already living it. That is what
Already doing.
really kills me.
That's crazy. That's crazy because it is true. The place they don't want to be there, they're willing to stay. It's that people will just endure it. It's like the
Yeah,
evil you know is better than the evil you don't. They just stay
yeah,
here and golly. It's crazy how life works like that, man. So you have, we'll call it, you've now designed your life differently. You've got a whole
yeah.
different way you live. You have an amazing wife. You guys both have amazing businesses. You do great things. You take people in helicopters and they shoot at things. It's pretty cool to watch. Uh, for the world now, though, I think there's a certain statement I love. I here's what I made this statement up, so that's why I love it. Here's the statement: you shouldn't tell people how to run the race until you've crossed some finish lines. That's my thought. I
Mm,
don't think anybody should be going back saying, "Here's how to do this." So you've
yeah.
crossed the line and go, "Hey, you know what? When I was running the race, if you'd have ran with me, we'd have both made a left, but you should have made a right." Right. So I know
Mm,
that now. I've crossed the finish line. I can look back. So you've done this. You've lived in this cool life. You're doing some great things. And it came to a culmination of you going, you know what? I want to take my voice and reach more with it in paper. So it turned into a book. I'd love for you to like dive deeper because we're in the path of the book anyways. That people we don't know.
mhm.
You don't know it yet, you guys listening. But I'd love you to kind of unpack the title of the book is all that fun stuff. And then really what was the journey to writing it? Before we get into what it is, a journey to writing it.
Yeah, so it's the journey to writing it. So it's Design the Man Within. You said say the title, right? You said-
Yeah, yeah, please.
uh, um,
It'd be helpful.
yeah, it's a mysterious book. We didn't title it; it's just a picture. No, just kidding. It's Design the Man Within. But the journey there was because the fact that I realized, like, with the freedom of life, like when I, because like what people don't know is when you're in military or paramilitary, if you've never experienced that lifestyle, it's very rigid, right? Like everything's kind of structured for you. And so for you to think that you have control of like where your life is going, you really don't. Like you don't. And so there's beauty in some aspects to that because it takes responsibility off of you to then just put your head down and go forward on whatever's told. But then once you leave that, and this is where people struggle with transition, is that like they don't know how to design the rest of their life. They don't know how to curate this to be something of their true, authentic passion and connection with themselves. And for me, like the journey was that I had to go through this process of realizing I didn't have a purpose. I had to go through the process of losing my first wife in a failed marriage. I had to through the process of not knowing who I was, of not liking the man in the mirror, because at the end of the day, from that process, I realized that I had the power to design who I looked like afterwards, and had the power to design the man that showed up in conversations like this, in every situation, and with certain principles and foundations of you know highly curated traits that I've picked out myself of what that man is and how he operates in this world, I've been able to create a man that no matter where I go, no matter what I do, no matter the environment I'm in or how I'm speaking to people, it's always consistent with the themes that I've put in my life and who I am. And I specifically designed that to be intentional of who I am every single day, which then makes life a lot easier because I don't have to keep up with lies and facades. Like I just get to
Yeah.
be me, but it's built around a really great structure. And I designed that myself, and I'm very happy, right?
I like that. It's really well stated. I think there's a good logic within that as well as a good heart within it. Because I'm the same. Like I never lie. If I can never lie, like I don't lie, even if it's something that's going to be uncomfortable, because I don't want to have to
Mm,
have the mental space to remember the lie. But I think
yeah.
there's also a place to where I have enough confidence in my sense of self to say this thing that you may not want to hear or may be awkward, but I know I can handle whatever comes after that. So it
Mm,
keeps us in a good space. So like but I had to design the guy who could be the person to say that, do that, operate in that
mm.
way, or even have the confidence of self, having gone through the crazy journey. So this book's been written. It covers the things we just talked about. Who's the perfect person to pick this thing up and read it?
Well, I specifically wrote it in a way because in the back in the 70s and 80s when they had the first men's movement, what I've talked to some of the elders in the men's space were like, yeah, it failed because the men that were creating the movement were very esoteric and spiritual and all these things, but they were not connected to the 97% everyday man. So when you're
Hmm.
doing a men's movement, but you got no men going to you, it's not really a men's movement. So I was
Yeah.
like,
I, I
we can't fail this time. We can't fail at this time because the fact that like we have such a quickly evolving society that like if we continue to be held back by old perceptions of masculinity and the way that men should quote unquote be, we're going to get left in the dust and we're going to become obsolete. So we need to start dealing with ourselves internally so we can show up better and evolve as men, as half of society, evolve ourselves so we can also complement the feminine and complement the way that society's going and create a strong, powerful figure that holds authority and presence. And so we don't see a lot of the chaos that's happening now to continue in the world, right? And so we need good men, and most men are good, but they need to find that. So the book is for the everyday man. That's what who I wrote it for because that's who I am. That's who I've grown up to be my whole life. I've been a blue collar family. I've been a hard worker every single day of my life. Like that is who
yeah.
I've been. And I know that's who's the backbone of what's really behind the men of society is the everyday man. So he needs something that he can pick up and say, oh, this is like a crack in the door to say, here's some real ways, real tangible tools to start to improve your own mindset and perception, and then improve the environment that everybody in is inside of around you that looks at you as a leader. Like because they
Yeah.
are. And so it's for that guy.
Yeah.
It's for him to have that conversation with himself.
I like that. Like my wife and I talk about all the time. Like there's no safe space. I feel like nowadays to talk about the desire to uplift like a masculine male. We talk about
Hmm.
this all the time. Like, we're around. It's a weird world, man. Like I have to have conversation with my son and go like to be a to me a masculine male doesn't mean you're trying to overbear and overpower and
Mm-mm.
and shove to anybody. It's just you have a duty, man, to be a good husband, a good father, protector, like to guide, to lead, to raise people up with good hearts. And so I like this idea of having something where you're saying it almost feels like a mixture of the two. Because to say the word design the man within, we wouldn't have heard that 50 years ago. Like it wouldn't be
Right.
it at all.
No.
That's not the statement coming out of old grandpa. And so the thing is, I like the idea because you're saying, look, we want to go back to that space somewhat of being okay, uplifting a strong male, but like we're talking about it from an interesting angle, which
Hmm.
I'm realizing this now, the interesting angle, because previously it's like just go out, do back breaking work, do crazy stuff, and don't speak. Like my grandpa doesn't talk. It's like
Yeah.
back in the day, grandpa just like you were strong if you just didn't say words, you just did things, like grandpa, man, you just get after it. Yeah, I don't know
Yep.
what his voice sounds like, but he just got after it, bro. You know,
Yeah.
so I like this idea of like we're going to bring the softer. I want to say softer side, but it is. It's kind of like the more we'll call it the more verbose side of it into how you're designing the man, who can still be strong and masculine, but also feel connected to other men who desire to be that as well.
Yeah, and the like you've already talked about it in this episode is that like that confidence that you get when you stand in that man, like you're confident to be vulnerable, and that
Yeah,
allows other people to attach to you, and also they feel safe in your presence, and in that safety is where the power is because then you end up having the ability to not only just open yourself to somebody who supports you and wants to be there for you, but then they also feel safe to say, oh yeah, let me share with you as well what I'm going through, and then now we become again what everybody talks about, we become an actual collective, right?
yeah, I agree. It's like a groundedness. It's funny that
Mhm.
we had this conversation. Somebody reached out to me after I gave a speech in Austin, of all places.
Yeah.
And she goes, I work with these men. She's like, I'd love to have a conversation with you about grounded masculinity. And I go, I didn't talk about grounded masculinity. She goes, no, but there's a sense to you. She's like, you
Yep.
just have this thing. Cause I can get, I can get down on a stage and do my thing, but there's still a part of me. It's like the former NFL linebacker, which is a very
Yep.
alpha aggressive persona. And it's, I have to be that to be able to thrive there. Same time, I'm play with my wife and do dumb things and make silly jokes, but I know how and when to switch in, even if it means immediately switching into that one. Like we're about to take a trip as a family to Japan,
Mm,
and there's a way that can nowhere near what your experience was, but I do know the moment that I leave my home, like my family is under my thumb to get home,
yeah.
like because you never know, right? So no matter what goes on, the way that I'm watching the world around them, the way that I'm walking and pacing, I'm aware of all things. A certain part of that, but that's why they can go there and have fun and be safe because they know that they got dad there. But I could also be loose and have fun. So that balance, that dance, I think, is what allows, like you're saying, people to feel like grounded and go like, I'm confident in this person being near me. Not
Yeah.
I know what they may be capable of, but I'm not scared of that. In fact, that brings me peace.
Yeah, and it's knowing what you're capable of that brings you that peace because you're like, oh yeah, like I know who I am. I've curated this man. It's taken me years to build all the tools he has, and he's safe in any environment, and therefore anybody with him is safe in any environment. And that's what you
Yeah.
bring to the table. And you're one of the people that I look to as men who exemplify this more than any other. Like you have that, which is why that woman came up to you and she's like, hey, and you're like, I didn't talk about this, but it's because of the fact that you have it and it shows with your energy. It shows how you carry yourself and people know
Yeah.
that about you. And also if anybody ever wants to experience that, really hyper NFL linebacker side of you, just go play frisbee golf with trucks. Like Ant will
Yeah, man.
was I feel
I
like
got
you
a
were
win,
gonna
dude.
at one point gonna tackle me when I went to go throw one.
No, I like to win. I like to win things. I don't know. It's a dance. But you know what's interesting is as we're talking about this design the man within, it's like here's the way that I hear this. It's a different level because I have kids, and so I think through like my men and my boys, right? Like I have my son, and part of me, it's like a weird, it's a dance I have to have with him because I understand he's a child, he's 13, but I need him to understand what he has to prepare himself for.
Hmm.
And so we do like this routine in the morning. We do a cold plunge every weekday. We do a little hike, and it's all together. A hike, a prayer, a gratitude, cold plunge meditation. We
Mm,
do all this stuff to ground him because I explained to him, I said, when I leave, you're the man of the house. If something happens, like you're still a child, but I need your mind to be thinking of that, right? Because
yeah,
at some point, I want to be able to send you off and be at peace when I go to bed at night, knowing you can protect yourself in public, right?
yeah.
And or I want you to have the same joy of a family that we have. And you may not realize this, but if you're with your wife who wants a male who may be what you portray, the moment that you get into an altercation or situation and it shows that you may not be the protector, you lose what that could be for the future of your life. Not
Mm,
because of anything more than it. She'll even subconsciously go, can this person protect our offspring?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's a weird dynamic to think through. But like I need him to think of this in advance somehow. But it's such an interesting dance. But I like the language you're using of like you design that. So it's weird. Like I might already be kind of doing that, but it's one of my
Hmm.
greatest fears of like, is he going to be that when I'm gone? Not this alpha football player, but like, can you be a protector to your wife, to your kids, to where you can enjoy the things that life gives? 'Cause I think there's a missing piece of this. When you are anchored and grounded as a man, man, you have an amazing life. When
Hmm.
you're loose and you're floaty, like we're talking to, your life is what it was, like yours was prior.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're creating in this design and what you're creating in this confidence is adaptability. Like people look at me or they look at spec ops in general, and it's like you're talking about the top 1% of the US military, right? And they're like, holy crap, you guys were crazy, like all this stuff, you could do all these different things.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you know why? Because we were adaptable. We were so grounded and so strong in our foundational skills and special operations that when things got chaotic or complex, we were so adaptable to it that it didn't matter. We were always going to overcome it. And for me, when it comes to designing these men, what I want men to get to is to be adaptable. I get so sick and tired of hearing men talk about how they're so rigid. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. Oh, I'm just that way. You're like, bro, no, I want to slap the crap out
You're
of you
not.
because you can be
Yeah.
different, bro. And you're
Yeah.
choosing to stay that way. And the adaptability is what makes people love you, but it also allows you to experience life. And when you experience life, you start to continue to compound that confidence. And then you get in
Mhm.
environments like being in Japan with your family, and you can float between the protector and the fun loving dad. and everything, and the romantic husband and all of those things all at once because of that ability to be adaptable.
Yeah. And then you draw these things into your life that will only be there if they feel like they can be there safely.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
And not only that, but then the people around you, your kids and your wife, get to experience life differently as well. Like you said, you're bringing experiences into your life that wouldn't have been there had you not been that man.
yeah. And even if you've talked to like your training for the spec ops stuff, like someone designed that training and then they
Yeah,
put you into it and then you adapted to it. You built that man. But I think there is a part of us that doesn't think about like that was designed. And what some men will go is, well, I didn't grow up blue collar like you, Johnny. I wasn't a spec ops like you, Johnny. I wasn't in the NFL like you, Anthony.
yeah,
And I think the interesting part of what we're saying is you don't have to have. You just have to give yourself a design that you put yourself into a call container of, and you allow yourself to grow through the experiences of everything. That's how you become these people in time.
yeah. And like, I would ask that guy, like, okay, so what were you? You were dirt poor and homeless? Cool. I got friends. One of my good friends up in Detroit, dirt poor, homeless, drug addict for many years of his life, went through rehab and literally became addicted to then living life and being the fullest version of himself, has created a multi-million-dollar business. Literally nothing
Mm,
special about him. He will tell you from this day on, like, I
yeah.
have nothing over anybody. I wasn't professional. I wasn't elite. I wasn't anything. I was a freaking drug addict living in a car or homeless, like all these things. And he's like, you look at his business now, a beautiful husband and father, and created literally a multi-million-dollar business out of that. And nothing set him up for
Mm,
success. So, like, what is it? Oh, or you were
mm,
handed the silver spoon and like you had the business handed to you. Cool. You should have the easiest time in the sense of you don't have to worry about money. All you have to think about is who you are. Right. And so it's like, give me
yeah.
any experience and I can tell you somebody who's done that and it's a real thing. I mean, you know plenty of people as well who've been through that, many different trials and
Mm,
tribulations. I mean, one of your close friends, Brendan Bouchard, in his book, he talks about how this multi-billion-dollar figure was completely unhappy with his life and flew him out at like 3 in the morning to talk to him and work through some stuff. And it's like, yeah, that guy had the silver
yeah.
spoon handed to him or whatever, if he was handed that, and then he still wasn't happy. So like all of these things, this designing, this intentional design of who we are has the ability to take place no matter your background.
I agree, man. It's just steps. Someone asked me, this is funny, this is like the third conversation I've had about this. And I don't know if I guided here subconsciously, but I was having a conversation 2 hours ago with a client. And then the conversation, a podcast I was on before this hour was this. And so the conversation was, Anthony, the idea of a podcast you do every single, I do a daily podcast also. I go, it's a daily podcast. They go, but I'm not disciplined like you. They go, I'm not as consistent like you. And I go, no, you're not understanding. The idea is I don't wake up and all of a sudden I'm consistent. I give myself a task to be able to be consistent to so I can be a consistent human, right? That's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it happens. So people go, "Oh, I'm not like you, John." Yeah, no, I know you aren't. I wasn't like me.
yeah,
Like I wasn't, But what happens? I gave myself something that forced me to show up to it to be this person in time. And if you're willing to do that, that's all you need. That
hmm,
mentality, if I can get better, that's all you need. And then the more you show up and do that, the more your possibilities open of what you can be more capable of. The hope opens up. The thoughts of, I can do this. All right, maybe I can do this, right?
yep,
To where I am positive that you have this mentality in public when you walk around. I know that things are at some point going to go wrong or they're going to go crazy. However, I bring me to the crazy. So
yeah.
I'm good.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where you start to have that sovereignty. That's where you start to really, in my opinion, experience life. And that's when you really get to be present. Like, when you have that form of mentality, like that's when you actually get to experience everybody around you, every environment you're in, every conversation you're having. And that's when you get to your end of days and look back and not have regret because you're like, no, I lived this life, and that was cool.
Mhm. Yep. That's the thing, man. That's all. It's, I seriously, I mean, if you've ever seen me speak, my thing is like the last person you want to meet in your deathbed is the person you could have been. And
Oh
that's
my
a fear of
God.
mine. And I
Hmm.
think it always ties to me to these little nuanced pieces. And I go, it's always because if I don't do something I'm supposed to now that is stopping me from taking the step that's going to lead me to someplace 6 years from now. 10 years from now,
Mm.
like 20 years from now. So I'm fearful of in the moment doing something that stops the progressive momentum of that. And so like for me, it's like, yeah, I want to show up and be the best I can, do the best I can. And sometimes that next level means I have to get out of my own way by admitting some part or accepting some part that I don't want to see so that I can actually bring the best of me to the worst of me in that moment. Damn, that's good.
It's
And then create
so
something cool
good.
ongoing.
So you do, man. That is good. You gotta
You
move
got to
forward
take
with
that.
that
It's good. That'd be good for your work. I mean, I can talk
one.
about it, but I think it's good for your work
I don't know.
because I
That's
think
good
I
for
love the
dark
idea
work.
you it is good for we could both use it. But I think
Yeah.
for you, when I think about it for your work, talking about helping men like design themselves and like and most men, let's be most of us, we can get down. It's why we can flow through life and do the same job, right? But that's the best parts of you, but it's not showing up in the areas that are not so great. And so if you can bring that person to see the thing you don't want to see about yourself, bring the best you, the worst you, something cool can happen from that.
Mm,
Yeah, I like this
I love that.
conversation. It's been fun. Two things, two last questions. First off, where do I send people to get this book, to consume it, to be part of the collective, all the fun stuff you do?
Send them over to designthemanwithin.com. That is where we're sending everybody to. We got a nice little page for people to see the book, get a feel for it, and then there's a little button on there y'all can click for going over to Amazon and making a purchase there. While we're doing our pre-sales, we have a pretty much free ebook, so it's 99 cents if y'all are willing to do that. I believe we may keep that open for the first week of sales, so if anybody wants to hop on there and get it, that's great. And then if not, just going over there and getting it at whatever availability you have, man. Like, and even print. I love print. I love reading physical books. I love, having those in my house. So you can go over there, but designthemanwithin.com is where we're sending them out to.
I like it. I like it. Last question. What promise did God or the creator make to the world when they created you?
Ooh, I think that they made a man who was too dumb to quit and could show the world
Mm,
that he can influence through perseverance, through development, through growth, and through authenticity. So I think that was what they made when they put me in this
I like it.
place.
I'm with it, man. It's a good one. That's a good. I mean, it's a solid example, man. It's a solid example of a good man. I appreciate you as a human, as a friend. I appreciate, man, seeing you live your life, dude. Because there's a part of me that so I meet a lot of men. I meet a lot of people all the time. I got and I like the men who I can be around and go. They're super loose, and I love them. But I know that if something went down, that there'd be no issues that they wouldn't be able to take care of. And there's a few. I could probably count on one hand the amount of men in my life that I know are like that. You're one of those men. So I appreciate you being who you are.
Mm.
And you guys were tuned in, man. Go check this man out. Designthemanwithin.com. His name is Johnny Elsasser. Go check his work out. And if you know someone who needs to listen to this episode, wifey, send it to your husband. Buddy, send it to your homeboy who needs to hear this stuff. You never know who can be changed in life by simply hearing a conversation like the one today. Outside of that, as always, make the most of your off shift moments. You can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Johnny Elsasser signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning into the Ah Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.